Today's passage is from the book of Zechariah, chapter 9, verses 9 through 12. Zechariah 9, or excuse me, 9 through 11. Zechariah 9 through 11. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, daughter of Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, righteous and having salvation, gentle and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. I will take away the chariots from Ephraim, and the war horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bow will be broken. He will proclaim peace to the nations. His rule will extend from sea to sea, from the river to the ends of the earth. As for you, because of the blood of my covenant is with you, I will free your prisoners from the waterless pit. Rejoice greatly. Shout for joy. Even in all the chaos, even as most of us are stuck at home most of the time, still, right now, we have a reason to rejoice. It is the Christmas season, and this is a time of joy. I'm not talking about rejoicing for the things the world rejoices over. It's not about the presents. Don't get me wrong. It's always fun to give presents and to get presents. I remember, I may have told you this story once before, I remember a few years ago, back when we were all able to meet together in large groups, I was leading one of the Good News Club Christmas parties over at the elementary school. And so I asked the kids, first and second graders, what are you excited about for Christmas? And one child said that she was really looking forward to getting together with her family. And another boy said he liked the Christmas Eve service at his church. And another kid said she really enjoyed the Christmas music. And another said they always made a happy birthday cake for Jesus on Christmas. And those were great answers, but they weren't really where I was going with my lesson. So I said to the kids, I always enjoy getting presents on Christmas. It is an odd experience to have 22nd graders shout at you. That's not the point. But they were right, of course. It's not about the presents. That's not where our joy comes from. It's not the decorations. I do love the decorations. Just a few weeks ago, I had to go into a store, to Menards. Don't worry, I wore my mask. I took James with me. And in that store, they had a display of Christmas trees. Artificial ones with lights on them and a little pathway going through. And every time we got anywhere near that display, James would jump and point and shout until I walked down the aisle. And as we walked down that little aisle, he'd point at each tree and go, ooh. And that was great. But that's not what Christmas is about. It's not where our joy comes from. It's not even getting together with family. And of course, family is important, though I recognize most of us will probably have to make some limitations on it this year. But that's not the source of our joy. It's not the food, though I like Christmas food. I like a big meal. It's not the music, though I enjoy Christmas carols. It's not the smell of pine in the air. It's not the gingerbread house or the sugar cookies. None of those things are the source of our joy. You probably heard that for many people, depression gets worse around the holidays. I think one of the reasons for that is that, at least for the unbelieving world, they are surrounded by the trappings of joy, but they don't have a reason to rejoice. We do. We have a cause for joy. Christmas marks the day that God became a man. Our God has stepped into our world. Reality itself has been unalterably changed. And so we have a reason to shout for joy as the sons and daughters of our God. And you gotta tell you, I'm constantly terrified I'm going to catch myself on fire right now, just so you know. We have a reason for joy. And so as we celebrate in this Christmas season, I want to continue to talk about the reason for our joy. And we're going to continue our look at the minor prophets. And today we're going to begin the book of Zechariah. And I'll say that from the moment I started talking about the minor prophets, I've been a little worried about Zechariah. From the first moment I started this series, Zechariah has been like a freight train barreling forward, and I have stepped onto the railroad tracks. Zechariah is one of the most confusing books in the Bible, without a doubt. Zechariah was a contemporary of Haggai. That means he was a post-exile prophet. The exile had happened, it was over, the people were back in their homeland. However, Haggai gave some very straightforward commands and instructions to the people. Zechariah is filled with symbolic and apocalyptic visions. There's talk of gold lampstands and flying scrolls and a woman sitting in a measuring cup. It is filled with visions like this. The book of Revelations, famous for its symbolic and controversial visions, relied more on Zechariah than any other book of the Old Testament. So I recognize the difficulty of approaching a book like Zechariah. However, this is still part of inspired scripture, and it still has a message for us today. So today, I want to look at the joy of Christmas as it's foretold in Zechariah. Because Zechariah, in the midst of his symbolic visions, told of a king that what God would bring to his people. And Zechariah tells us 5 things about this king who would be born on Christmas Day. And I want to look at these 5 things we can learn from Zechariah about the king who was born on Christmas. After beginning by telling us to rejoice greatly and shout for joy, sons and daughters of God, Zechariah then talks a little bit about this great king. And the first thing he says is, see, your king is coming, righteous and having salvation. First thing we're told about this king is that he is righteous. And that would have really hit home for the Israelites because they had not been righteous. Their kings had not been righteous. The defining event of their generation, the exile, the destruction of Jerusalem, happened because of how unrighteous their kings had been. So these were not people with some kind of illusions of greatness. They did not pretend that they were such good people, that they deserved God's protection. They had a lifetime of empirical evidence showing that wasn't true. But God offered them a new king, a righteous king. A king who would really show them what it is to worship the Lord. God offered them a different kind of king who would be born on Christmas Day. Often in this world we don't even know what righteousness looks like. But God said he would reveal his righteousness in a coming king. A king who would give us reason to rejoice because he shows us what righteousness really is. And we see that righteousness in Jesus Christ. So we rejoice because the king is righteous. Second, Zechariah said the king would come riding on a donkey. Okay. I mean, nothing's wrong with a donkey, I guess. They're strong, pound for pound. A donkey is stronger than a horse the same size. And despite their reputation for being stubborn, donkeys are not stubborn. They're just smart enough not to follow people when we lead them into a dangerous situation. So, there's that. But why a donkey? We all know that on Palm Sunday, Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey. It was the high point of his ministry. The people rightly understood that by riding a donkey, Jesus was declaring that he is the king that Zechariah was talking about. And they lined the streets and praised God and declared Jesus king, all because he rode in on a donkey. But why a donkey? Well, I think for Zechariah, it's less about being a donkey and more about what the king would not ride on. Usually, a conquering king rides into town with a show of power. King rides in on a war horse or on a chariot. In the modern world, he might come in on a helicopter or a black bulletproof limousine surrounded by armed guards. He comes in showing his power. But God said that he would take away that power, that he would take the chariots away from Ephraim and the war horse away from Jerusalem. Jerusalem was the capital city of Israel. Ephraim was the most influential tribe in Israel at that time. And God said he would take away their chariots and their war horse, the symbol of their power. He would send them a king who was riding on a donkey. This king was not going to come with the power of this world. He was not going to come with a show of force that the people of this world listen to. He would come riding on a donkey. He would come gentle and kind instead of forceful. Jesus would not be the kind of king that this world looks to. He would not come with violence and upheaval. Israel knew violence and upheaval. They had lived through it. But God would send them a king who was peaceful, who was gentle in spirit. And we still live through violence and upheaval. We still face wars and rumors of wars. Christmas is a reminder that the Prince of Peace has come into our world. So, God said he would send a king who was righteous and riding on a donkey. Third, this king's dominion would extend from sea to sea. I kind of talked about this last week, so I don't want to dwell on it too much now, but Christ has come to establish his kingdom. It's not a kingdom of this world. It's not a kingdom of political power and armies and lines on a map. His kingdom is his body, the church. It's not defined by where we live or who we pay taxes to. It's defined by allegiance to the king. And his kingdom extends from sea to sea, from one side of the globe to the other. His church continues to expand throughout this world and shall never fall. All earthly nations eventually fall. Kingdoms of this world rise and fall. And someone who puts their faith in a human nation or a political party will eventually face defeat. But we have a God who's created a new kind of kingdom. A kingdom that will last eternally, that will extend to the ends of the earth, that shall never fall. So as the king be born, he would be righteous. He would come riding a donkey. His kingdom would extend from sea to sea. And fourth, he would establish this by the blood of his covenant. Okay, in Zechariah's days, covenants were still occasionally established in blood. Quick explanation of words. A contract is where two people make an agreement as long as the other one follows through. Probably the most famous, most common kind of contract in our world today is an employment contract. I agree to do a certain job, someone else agrees to pay me for it. If I don't do the job, I don't get paid. If I don't get paid, I don't do the job. A covenant is where two groups agree to do something no matter what the other person does. And in the ancient world, covenants, specifically a covenant of blood, was almost always one-sided. It was when a conquering king had defeated another king, then that defeated king would make a covenant, more or less saying that if I ever rebel against this king, then may my blood be shed. Jesus redefined what it meant to have a covenant of blood. He did not come demanding the blood of others, but he shed his own blood for us. He said from the beginning that was why he came. Over in the Gospel of Mark, Jesus said, the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Christmas Day marks the point of no return for God's plan of salvation. It marks the day when God came into the earth as a man. The salvation God had been announcing since the days of Adam and Eve came to fruition on Christmas Day. We rejoice on Christmas because it sets the stage for Easter. That Jesus would shed his blood for us. We live in a world that is constantly trying to take advantage of others. We live in a world filled with people who are ready to shed others' blood. We have a God who shed his own blood for us. That process began on Christmas Day. So we rejoice. And this leads us right into the fifth and final reason that we rejoice on Christmas Day. Jesus has come to set prisoners free. Now, Zechariah's day, that probably confused people a little bit. God would send his king to set them free. Most of them would have said that they were already free, that God had just set them free. This was a generation born and raised in captivity. They had spent their lives as slaves in Babylon, and God had just set them free and sent them back to their homeland. They thought of themselves as newly freed people. But now God said he would have to send a king to set them free, to release them from their waterless pit. A waterless pit is essentially a dungeon. But these people thought they already were free. As I read this, I can't help but think of the Gospel of John, where Jesus said, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." And the people heard Jesus say that, they responded, "What are you talking about? We are the children of Israel, of Abraham. We have never been slaves to anybody. How are you going to set us free?" Kind of a crazy statement when you think about it. We are the children of Abraham, and we've never been slaves to anyone. They were slaves to everyone. They were slaves to the Egyptians. They were slaves to the Babylonians, slaves to the Assyrians. They were slaves to the Greeks. As they said that, their nation was occupied by the Roman Empire. But I think Jesus was going for something deeper here. It wasn't just an external slavery. Jesus said, anyone who sins is a slave to sin. That is the power of sin. It can enslave us. It can overrun our lives. We have a God who has come to set us free. We have a king who brings freedom. He sets us free from addiction. He sets us free from guilt. He sets us free from anger, from lust, from despair, from hopelessness. We have a God who has come to set us free. Not that we're ever going to be perfect in this life. As long as we are in the flesh, we will struggle with sin. But sin doesn't have to run our lives anymore. We have a God who has come into this world to set us free. And so on Christmas we rejoice. And we have a reason to rejoice. It's not all the external things. It's not the trappings of celebration that surround us. We rejoice because the King has come into our world. He is righteous, and he has shown us what righteousness is. He is gentle and mild. He comes riding on a donkey, not on a war horse. He is the King with all authority in heaven and on earth, and yet he still is gentle and mild in spirit. He is the God, the in very nature God himself, and yet he came as a servant. His kingdom shall extend from sea to sea. He has established it by the blood of his covenant. And he has come to set us free. So as we approach Christmas, we rejoice. I'm not going to pretend this has been an easy year. This has been a tough year for a lot of people. There has been heartache, there has been loss, there has been at times a sense of stress and anxiety and even hopelessness. But through it all, our God remains on the throne. He is the King of all kings. He is the one who has shown us what is good and what is right. He has come to set us free. So despite all the struggles of this world, we have a reason to rejoice. As we approach Christmas, we remember the King has come, and we rejoice because it is for freedom's sake that we have been set free. In a moment, we're going to stand for our invitation hymn. And as we stand to sing, if you don't have that freedom, if you don't have that joy, if Christmas has been reduced to presents and food and decorations, but you want something more. You want the joy of the Lord in your life, and you know you don't have it right now. You have an opportunity. This week, talk to myself, talk to one of the elders, but if you need to make your own commitment to Christ, if you need more than what this world has to offer, if you need the joy of the Lord, you have that opportunity. I ask you to stand with me now for our invitation hymn, which is, "Oh, come all ye faithful," and we will sing all the verses.